Hello everyone, I would like to remind you to please give me some TLC, touch the subscribe button, like the video, comment, you can even press the bell. Today I want to discuss the idea of taking the dichotomy between top-down systems and bottoms-up or grassroots designs into areas which have less been discussed. They're mostly been discussed in the idea of computer science, sometimes sciences and humanities, less in social sciences, and that's why I want to bring it in today, especially regarding language, religion, and law. And we should start with language. And the idea of a language is we have natural languages. I think we talk about natural languages, most languages we speak, which develop naturally. And then we can speak about languages that theoretically are top-down. Okay, for instance, they can be computer languages, but let's give an example of artificial languages. Okay, Esperanto, Zamenhof's artificial language, Ido, lingua franca, capital L and G. Okay, these artificial languages, someone came up with rules. Okay, for instance, Zamenhof, that Jewish-Polish guy came up with rules for Esperanto, and now people speak that language. And most languages develop regularly. But like many areas in life, there's a spectrum. As humanity and science develop, we realize that most areas of life are spectrum. It's true, you cannot be half pregnant, but in most areas there is a middle ground. For instance, if in the past we talked about right wing and left wing, in politics, most of us realize today there's a lot of center politics. And maybe the majority of people are there actually. If in the past we talked about rich versus poor, the last few centuries we realize there's a very big and important middle class. And most areas in life, there is a gray area between the black and the white. So here too, the fact that language is artificial does not mean that it's all top down. There's also an element of grassroots. Obviously, natural languages, they're definitely that way. The language develops and the rules only come later. So some non-linguists confuse it because many major languages today have language academies, French and Italian and many languages. To a large extent, English doesn't, especially not in the important countries like UK and US. There's no language academy. There's dictionaries, okay, like Webster, Oxford, which can introduce words, but it's not an academy. But the place that have academy, they come and tell you, you're allowed to say this, you're not allowed this is correct, this is incorrect. And then we feel like we're all people who follow a certain amount of rules. But no, the language developed from the people. And eventually, rules are put on. And that's why there's virtually in every language there's many irregular verbs and other things, because language develops naturally. But even in artificial languages, which you think, okay, that's a top-down system. Well, not once people start speaking it. Once people start speaking Esperanto, they're going to develop slang. They're going to find new words and new phenomena to come and find words for it. They're going to have different dialects. So once the language starts being spoken, there's already an element of grassroots, even in unnatural languages. If I move that to the idea of law, so we've discussed in the past the idea of civil law versus common law. And again, obviously, if we go back to that spectrum, like natural languages are on the side of the spectrum, which is much more grassroots, and artificial languages much more top-down. Here too, civil law is more top-down. Okay, you follow the laws that are given. While common law, every time there's a trial and a verdict, the law changes. There's a new precedent which is more binding. And furthermore, we know that verdict often is affected also by a jury. And it's more adversarial, meaning the attorneys have more of a role. So there's much less top-down where the judge or the legislator gives a rule and they just follow, but rather there's a trial. The people have their attorneys give ideas. This affects the judge and the jury, and that in turn, affects also the law. But even in systems of civil law, obviously there's a lot of laws that develop from the people. Even the Roman law, it didn't start like a bunch of laws coming out of nowhere. No, there were certain customs, certain clan rules, certain things that were happening, and upon that, the law came into action. And also in religion, and specifically religious law, when I talk about religious law, I'm focusing mainly on Islam and Judaism, who the two systems, probably more than any other system in the world, have a strong legal system that tells a person what he needs to do on the day-to-day life, how he has to get up in the morning, how he has to wash his hands and feet, how he has to pray, how many times, and so on. Here too, seemingly would say, well, religious law, especially monotheistic law, it's divine revelation, right? It's top down. It comes from God. God reveals the Bible, right? Or God reveals the Quran through the archangel Jibril to Muhammad, and then we all follow. But we'll see that here too, there's a lot of elements of grassroots. I'll start with the Hebrew Bible and Judaism. The laws don't come out of nowhere. First of all, we know that all over the Fertile Crescent in the Near East, there were legal systems. The most famous one, perhaps, probably the first found, is Hammurabi, around 1750, before Common Era. But there are others. And we know that the Bible negotiates with them, is familiar with them, and accepts some of it, somewhere differs. But also, more than that, a lot of biblical laws, first of all, already are familiar with customs. Okay? In the book of Ruth, it talks about an older custom of removing a shoe in order to make a transaction. When we are told about the law that a woman is not allowed to return to her first husband after she married a second one and divorced him, we are told about the idea where she marries a first husband, he gives the divorce papers, and she marries a second, and he dies. Also get divorce papers. She is not allowed to return to the first. But this is the first time we even hear about the idea of a divorce paper. We are not told about a law of giving divorce papers, till we assumed it's already known, and we're giving an extra idea, Bible gives an extra idea, what happens when she marries again? Can she ever return to her first husband? And many other areas, what we talk about in the Bible, in the book of Numbers, we have the blood redeemer, the blood avenger. And this is based on systems of clan blood feuds, which are known all over antiquity. We know it from the China, the Three Kingdom period in China, 2 centuries before Common Era. We know it from ancient Greece. We know it all over the Fertile Crescent. And by the way, we know it even in modern times. I mean, if we talk about 21st century, there's been a blood feud in Ireland, in Limerick, okay, between gangs, starting in 2000 and going on, especially the first decade of the 21st century, and continuing to some extent till today. So this idea of blood feuds exists between clans, between gangs, from antiquity till modern times, really. And the Bible acknowledges that and then puts on top of that rule, well, how can someone protect himself from the blood avenger, from the blood redeemer? And then they make cities of refuge, 6 cities of refuge, where you can escape there and stay there till the high priest dies and so on. So there's acknowledgement of all the customs and rules that are more grassroots. And furthermore, in Islam, okay, Islam, the worship is in the Kaaba. Muhammad knew that the Kaaba was a place of worship for pagans. The Jahiliyyah state, in the time of the pre-Islamic Arabic age called the Age of Ignorance by Muslims. So yes, the belief is originally was created by Abraham and Ishmael, and later it was converted to pagans. So a lot of times religious revolutions are presented as restorations. That's common. But still, there is acknowledgement that there's still a use of the old worship. Why did Friday become the day where you gather in the big mosque? That happened because that was a day of business where they dealt with it. So you see that many times also Islam acknowledges older customs and reacts to that. That some of it's grassroots. When Muhammad said you can marry up to 2, 3, 4 wives, but if you can't deal with it, just marry one, he's talking about an idea where he knows already that people marry many wives in the Arabian Peninsula, more than 4. He's saying, look, you can marry up to 4 if you feel like that's hopeful, for instance, let's say, for how commentators understand as helping widows and so on. But if you can't handle it, just keep to 1. But it's acknowledgement of already older customs. Meaning that Islam and Judaism and Roman law and common law never come in a tabula rasa. They don't come with an empty plate upon people, make rules, and then start following. Just like language, there is an element of grassroots, the things that already exist, all kind of customs and traditions. They're a clan member, and upon that, we try to make a rule system, and it still develops. Until today, you'll find in Islamic and Jewish law, for instance, where they say the custom is like this, or the tradition in Iraq was to do this or that. So there's acknowledgement that put it into the law, meaning that the law acknowledges the idea of customs that come before. So what I wanted to say generally, the idea of top down to bottoms up is first of all somewhat fluid. Sometimes we think that something is top down, but really it's bottoms up. We can see that in language, in law, and in religion. And sometimes we can see the opposite. In government, again, we have a spectrum. We have democracies and dictatorships, but it's not a dichotomy. Because even in democracies, where we think, oh, that's definitely grassroots, right? That's bottoms up. We vote. They only represent us. But many democracies have elements of oligarchy, of plutocracy. And that's a system where you see where the rich may have more power. Why? Because they can control the media more. Or they can donate to certain candidates more money. Yet to become the president of the United States, often someone needs close to $1 billion, certainly many hundreds of millions. How can he get that? Perhaps he himself is a billionaire, and therefore it gives advantage to billionaires to run. He may have donators, billionaires' friends who donated, and again it gives them more power, and if they give him a lot of donations, he's going to probably answer back to them and take care of their interests. And while a grassroots is possible system, we saw that for instance Bernie Sanders, it's a unique idea, and so far no president has become president through mainly grassroots means. So we see that it is complicated. So even a system in government, for democracy, we see, oh, that's definitely bottoms up. There's a lot of elements of top down. I hope this made sense. I'm trying to give idea of a design which we can apply to other things. Again, this design was used in computer sciences, is used in religion, but less in religious law. It was used in a system of when, in the Hebrew Bible, when they talk about repentance, they talk about, well, does God need to bring us to him, or do we have to come bring him to us? That's talking other religious systems. The 12 steps, they talk about the idea. What part does I need to do, and what part is God doing for me? In Kabbalah, they have that. Okay, there's Aramaic terms, itaruta dil'ila, which means a top-down, where God gives the awakening, the spiritual awakening, and itaruta diltata, where man creates the spiritual awakening. So this system does exist in some areas, and I try to apply it to some extent and see so there's a spectrum, it's not a dichotomy, and sometimes one can seem like more top-down, it's more bottoms-up, like maybe government democracies, governmental democracies, and sometimes it can seem more top-down, like language or religious law or civil law, and actually you can have a system that also has a lot of grassroots involved. Hope this made sense to you. Thank you for listening. I'm reminding you, please, to give me some TLC, touch the subscribe button, like the video, comment, and even press the bell if you're so inclined. Thank you, and see you next time.